Thanks, the gentlelady from Minnesota's Dale Ricky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to remind everybody, and I was checking Mr. Massey's clock there, his debt clock. We're just about at 34 trillion, and he reminded me that it's $77,000 a second. So I think that's a sober reminder when we're talking about we have to get the fiscal house in order. And but as we talk about it, I recognize that there's lots of accusations out there talking about housing, and I wanted to turn to Mr. Cole, or Chairman Cole, and ask him, you know, with respect for housing, what does this bill do to protect the basic housing needs of vulnerable Americans that we're talking about?
Well, quite a bit, frankly. Again, we're hampered somewhat by, again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the fact that a lot of the money that normally flows into HUD through refinancing, it's not money we appropriate, it's just simply fees attached to refinancing, has stopped coming in. Why? Because the explosion in spending in previous years, largely under my friends on the other side of the aisle tenure, has meant who wants to refinance at 8% interest rate? Nobody. So again, we maintain the basic levels of funding that are necessary to protect the population that's in public housing now. And by the way, that's no easy task because anybody, you know, that pays rent knows their rent is going up too, because again, interest rate explosion and you know, again, this excess spending has categories. So we have billions of dollars appropriated to maintain vulnerable populations. We increased housing. Again, I make this as no partisan charge, but you want to see bad housing, go to an Indian reservation and see what the federal government has not done over 20 years under both Republican and Democratic administrations, Republican and Democratic Congresses. So again, we've tried to maintain where we're at, and at the same time, all we've done is really go back to 1992 levels. Excuse me, 2022, FY 2022 levels and funding. But we've cut back in some areas so we could maintain housing.
And just to be clear, will any evictions happen because of the cuts to the?
No.
Thank you. And with respect to air travel,
that's actually an area where we've increased spending pretty dramatically and are pretty much in line with what the administration asked for. We recognize that during COVID, we were not maintaining air traffic control output or production of new air traffic controllers at an appropriate level. So we've pretty much given the administration most of what it asked for in terms of updating new technologies, try and make sure that we can move ahead. So FAA is largely untouched in this bill. As a matter of fact, again, will come in above what we've done the last several years and pretty much in line with where the administration's at.
And what about land-based transportation and the safety there?
Well, same thing. Again, to go back to a point that was made earlier, we've appropriated an enormous amount of money outside the normal fields. Over $3 trillion, as Mr. Simpson, Chairman Simpson, mentioned. There's over $37 billion more per year over the next 5 years moving into infrastructure. So, yes, we've adjusted some programs in the normal system, but there's enormous amounts of money now flowing into this system. And that's the problem. Our friends passed a lot of spending. They didn't pay for very much of it. Frankly, didn't pay for any of it. But in the end, you do pay. You pay for it with a higher inflation rate, which it's the highest inflation rate in 40 years, and you pay for it in higher interest rates. And we have the highest interest rate. So you talk to the average Americans in my district, and I suspect most of the members' district around here, they'll tell you their number one problem is putting food on the table, given the inflation rate, is keeping a roof over their head, given the inflation rates and the rise in rent, and acquiring a home, the ultimate American dream, given the inflation rate. So we're trying to rein back as much of the spending as we can, maintain basic programs. Again, we didn't go back very far. Again, we went back to essentially 2022 levels in this bill. And we also got rid of the emergency spending that we had in the bill. You know, when you're spending as much money as we were spending last year, the last session, the $3 trillion, the idea that we had to add $3.6 billion in emergency spending to HUD, it's ridiculous. You can't, it's not sustainable. And the only way it's being sustained, again, is we're savaging the average American's budget by raising the cost of everything families buy, and by increasing the interest rates, if it's a purchase where they have to borrow something to actually get a new home or a new automobile or anything else you buy, again, we've got to bring those things under control. Controlling spending is one of the ways you do that.
And I appreciate that. And even though I'm Ways and Means, I appreciate the work that appropriators did and really took a look and came up with bills that make sense, but also recognize the fact that we are in debt and make some cuts that need to be made. So thank you all. And with that, I get back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady from New Mexico.